I want to tell you how to deal powerfully with feminism if you are a man. Is feminism ruining your life? Are the feminists driving you crazy? Are the feminist women making it so that you feel like you are not allowed to be a man anymore? I want to talk a little bit about what feminism is, what it isn't, and why it's messing things up so much, not just for men, but for women too. This is probably impacting you, whether you're just, you're single and you want to be flirting or dating, romance. The whole thing seems kind of weird with all the feminist and woke stuff that's going on out there. And even if you're married, right? This stuff can affect you. It'll maybe make you feel like you can't express your male desires without being some kind of weird Neanderthal and judged for your desires because feminism, right? Especially if your wife considers herself a feminist. And this is a big issue. We've reached a point where men feel like hitting on a girl can get you arrested. Of course, hitting a girl can get you arrested, but hitting on a girl, flirting with her, should not be a crime. Looking at a woman shouldn't be a microaggression that gets you socially canceled, right? So I want to tell you how to deal powerfully with feminism if you are a man. I was in Moscow, and a friend of mine over there said to me, "Is it true that feminists get angry with you if you hold the door for them?" I said, "No." I said, that is not true. But his impression of America is based on all of the social media and based on everything that we see on the news and television. It seems like the feminists have taken over to such an extent that you can't even hold a door for a woman without getting screamed at. That was certainly his impression. And where he is, over in Russia, traditional sex roles are far more acceptable, and holding a door for a woman usually gets you, "Oh, I thank you," right? So I thought about this, and there is a reality here that is not being translated correctly into social media. The truth is, I hold doors for women all the time, and I have never been yelled at for it. There's a disconnect between what's really going on and what we feel like is going on because we spend so much time on social media. If you spend enough time on social media, if you were on my social media account, you would think that everywhere in the world there were guys in boxing rings getting knocked out, because I get all the boxing ring knockouts on my feed, or there's like a lot of car accidents on my feed. Like driving is super dangerous according to my Instagram feed. And it is possible that we're all getting a skewed view of what reality is like because of what we're seeing being posted by some crazy people on Instagram and Twitter and TikTok. And it may not be totally reflective of what's happening in reality out there. So I just want to begin with this premise that I think a lot of men are very frightened by this idea of feminism, and they don't need to be. I actually think you can hold a door for a woman anytime you want, and it's going to be fine. But there are things further down the line that have shifted. I mean, flirting is definitely not what it used to be. I actually had a woman say to me, in the modern world, people don't flirt in real life. There are apps for that. But that's bullshit, because the apps only work if you're incredibly good looking. Like really beautiful women and really beautiful men can find each other. And then there's a bunch of like women who post on there so that they can get free meals or money, like actual money. The dating apps are a very, very fraught place for the average guy. They don't really work. And frankly, under the best of circumstances, they're okay for hookups, but not really for meeting people in an efficient way. Like when you meet somebody face to face and you talk with them a little bit, you really get a feel for who they are. There's almost like a pheromone thing, like you smell them, you know whether the compatibility is there in a really different way. And face-to-face meeting is still, to my mind, for my money, the best way for men and women to meet each other. And if it were true that feminism was preventing that from happening, then that would be something of an emergency. But I think this idea that it's an emergency, this idea that there's a big panic, is overblown. But there are a lot more rules now than there used to be, and knowing these rules is important. Back to the video in a moment. But if you're struggling in your relationships with women, the answer might very well be a lack of attraction. How do you build attraction? Well, I've got a diagnostic quiz that's going to help you to locate exactly what your issue is and get you on the road to having more success in every one of your relationships. Click here and check it out now. Now back to the video. So I want to make a quick distinction here and come out with like a damaging admission. I am Alex, and I am a feminist. I consider myself a feminist because in my mind, feminism means something specific, which is that women and men are of equal value in our society. And that's all it means to me. Now, there's a bunch of people out there, I think a very small number of women who think feminism means women are awesome, men suck, men shouldn't be allowed to really do anything outside of the house other than work and make money, and that if a man and a woman are in some kind of a disagreement, the man is automatically wrong. There are women that think that, but it's a very, very tiny, tiny number, and these women are extremely insecure, extremely emotionally immature, and they're nuts. And I don't think we need to deal with them. I think we can literally marginalize these people and pretend that they don't exist. That is actually the way I feel. There is also a huge number, it's a tiny number of women, but there's a huge number of men that think that feminism is that. There's a huge number of men that think that a lot of women feel this way because those women are loud, right? It's like there are people in the United States that think that everybody that lives in the Middle East is a terrorist. Almost nobody anywhere is a terrorist, right? That's just not the way it really is. There are almost zero terrorists in the Middle East. It's a tiny, tiny number, but they make a big splash, right? And there are people who just are naive. They're ignorant about this. And I think that the feminism scare is a lot like that. And I want to be super clear here. There is this woke idea that men and women are the same, and we are not the same. Like, if you have eyeballs, you can tell that we're not the same. This is not a matter of some kind of thing we need to figure out, like where did the universe come from? Was it God or some random chance of physics? It's not like that at all, right? We can all look and see that men and women are not the same. So therefore, mathematically speaking, the term equal does not apply. There is another mathematical term. The term is equivalent, which refers to two things that are of equal value. They're not the same, they're not identical, they have equal value. And that's what equivalent means, and men and women are equivalent, or at least they certainly ought to be. That should be our aspiration, for men and women to be equivalent in all things, though we can never truly be equal in many things, right? This is crucial, because if men and women are the same, then there can't be anything called sexual polarity. And sexual polarity is what causes attraction. And just like magnetic polarity, it's because, it's this opposites attract thing, right? They're not truly opposites, but they are polar. They are different from each other. And it is our differences that make us attracted to each other. Men are attracted to women precisely because of the things on their body that are different from the things that are on our body, not because of the things that are the same, right? It's the things that are different. That's where attraction lives. And it's the same for her, right? Women are attracted to men because of our differences, not because of our sameness. So our sameness is crucial. I consider myself a feminist. I think feminism is important insofar as that goes. But as soon as you cross the line from equal value to, no, we are the same, you've stepped outside of reality. Now, look, I want to have some empathy here because I get it. I get why some women take it to an extreme and are disgusted with masculinity, even though masculinity is the very thing that women are biologically, naturally attracted to. But there are women out there that think all masculinity is toxic and that men should be ashamed of everything about them that makes them masculine. They should be disgusted by their sexual urges. And I get it. I get where the horror comes from because we're living through a period where we all have to confront the fact that our violent tendencies, our rage and our anger with each other might be our undoing, right? We have weapons now where we could literally destroy ourselves. And we even see in political discourse, the fractures, I mean, they're horrible. But violent rage, this possibility of going out and trying to kill each other largely exists only in one gender, right? It's men who act violently on their rage most of the time. It's men that, start wars and stuff. So I get it. There are things about masculinity that are difficult in our modern world, even though there is a great deal of nobility and a great deal of honor in becoming a man that can defend yourself and your family, and in the gravest extreme, having to do that, having to actually put your safety and your life at risk for the sake of others. I mean, I get that there's huge nobility in that, but also it's become, in our modern world, a frightening prospect. And so I think we're throwing away a baby with the bathwater there. We need to not do that. There's something extremely important and noble and essential in masculinity that must not be lost, just as there's something essential and noble and magnificent in femininity that nobody wants to lose. We don't want to be the same. We don't want to be the same. We just want to hold this equal value with each other. The idea of feminism first came out from a book called Women of the 19th Century by a woman named Margaret Fuller. And Margaret Fuller presented this kind of radical idea about the differences in genders. And that radical difference was that prior to Margaret Fuller, there was this idea that came from Aristotle that men and women simply occupied separate spheres, he said, the separate spheres. We lived in totally different worlds, and we only came together for the purpose of mating. And Margaret Fuller was like, no, that's not true. Men and women can both be effective artists and in the workplace and all of that. But essentially, there is this thing called sexual polarity, and that the differences of men and women exist in this space of sexual polarity where, romance and seduction and flirting happen. And we don't want to lose sexual polarity. Even within gay couples, there's usually some kind of sexual polarity that allows for this thing that we call attraction. The self-evident truth is that men and women are both essential to humanity and to each other, and that we are of equal value, but we are not the same. The way the rules have changed, I think, is that you can still hold a door for somebody, but that is no longer, I don't think it's totally unacceptable, but it is no longer part of the way sexual polarity works in our society. Because when you're doing that, there's some pointing at a gender difference. Now, you can hold the door for everybody, men and women. I think that's fine. But if you're only doing it for women, I think that is now, and I am guilty of this, but I think that's an anachronism now. I think that's not the way the modern world works. And if we go to something even more, like take it to the next level of, like, say, helping a woman on with her coat, it is now inappropriate for you to do that with an acquaintance, or certainly inappropriate with a stranger, even though that has now become something that men don't do anymore. Like, you wouldn't, if you had a woman in your office that was working with you and you helped her on with her coat, that would be weird, right? That would be weird now. Sexual polarity simply has no place in the formality of the workplace or even among strangers. It really only exists now in environments where people are flirting and meeting each other, like in a bar, a dance club, or that kind of thing. It is absolutely now a mark of flirting. Like you're creating a space of sexual polarity. So in some ways, it's made sexual polarity a little bit easier because you only do these things in a situation where you are pointing a finger at the difference between men and women. So it's still very appropriate on a date. It's still very appropriate if you've been talking to a woman throughout the evening at a party and you want it to be more than just a friendship and you help her on with her coat. Oh, well, now you've made a declaration that you're viewing her not as a human, as just an equal person, but as an equivalent person now, as a woman. As a woman, you're kind of stating your claim. Is it possible that you will run into one of these women that will be offended and say, I can put on my own coat? Yes. Yes, it's possible, apparently, because I've had men who tell me that they've run into that situation, but I ain't seen it. For me, I think it's a weird and rare thing. I don't think it should stop you in any way from pursuing your interest in flirting. I think there are places now where it is more well-defined as being off limits, and I think we need to be sensitive to that. Somebody was telling me that they were flirting with a woman in a grocery store, and she started screaming at him and called the manager and wanted to have him arrested. Now, I don't know if I believe him, by the way. That's what he said. I don't know if I believe him, but is it impossible? No, it's not impossible. We do need to be a little bit more careful right now. In grocery stores, it's simply not as clear a place to walk over and say, hey, I think you're beautiful, as, say, a singles bar, right? Or a dating app. There are now more of a dividing lines between the places where we can and can't do this stuff. And In some ways, that's probably a good thing. And in some ways, of course, it's a frustrating thing and a difficult thing. But I urge you not to lose this, the truth of sexual polarity. I urge you not to lose it and not to be afraid. I think that you need to use your head and recognize that there are places where it's inappropriate. Recognize that in places where it's appropriate, women still appreciate it. Women still want to feel feminine. And the only way they get to feel feminine is when you are in your masculine and doing masculine things. So look, I get it. If you are still feeling nervous and anxious about this stuff and you really don't want to be labeled a creeper and you have some concern about the differences between creating sexual tension and just being creepy in flirting and in meeting women, I have a video on that subject too. So that's what you should watch next. I think it'll clarify this because I think men really can hit on women and create sexual tension without any fear of being creepy. So go check that out, and I will see you in the next one.